physically do that. And that developed from there into a completely different game. So again, working it backwards, can you design me a railway-based tile laying game using a real map? So it's all of that kind of, it's almost backwards. So start with a design brief and work backwards is the way I'm tending to work.
For me, I work fairly similarly to Andrew, but it's more problem-based design. So Andrew will come up to me with a problem and say, I don't know how to do this. So for example, one of the games I designed, he was invited to a workshop where there were a lot of plastic toy manufacturers. And he was saying, how do I design a game to present to plastic toy manufacturers?
Yeah, so all my stuff's flat, it's cards and boards. So
I went, you could design a game like this. And we started working on a game that was for plastic toy manufacturers. Another one was a simple game that he'd come up with for another company where it was to do with solving crimes and detectives, but it was, they wanted something a little bit more interactive. And I came up with the storytelling game. So it was trying to solve a problem that was there with one of the games. We do. I think it would go down really well at Compulsion.
Rita, what about you? What does your design process look like?
So normally, because my games are very narrative heavy, and sort of partially based in reality, I usually end up doing like a few months of just research and taking down a lot of notes before I can actually start like really designing anything. So from there, I usually will just look at like a lot of imagery and read a lot of reference material and try to use that to get inspiration to start making puzzles out of it and put together some kind of story. So for the game that I've been working on for the past 2 years, which I just recently finished, it's about an alchemist in 1400s Prague. So I looked through a lot of things about Prague, a lot of things about alchemy, scoured through like many medieval manuscripts and a lot of really weird images that you can find if you start looking for them. So I usually use things like that as inspiration for the puzzles because they're just sort of like, oh, this looks weird, and what are all these weird symbols on this? And it just like lends itself really well to manipulating it to make something out of it. But I just started working on a new project, which is going to be a puzzle tarot card deck. And that one is a little bit less narrative. Like it's not about a set of characters, but rather it's supposed to be about the deck, like telling your fortune with the cards as you solve them. So with that, I was able to like jump right into the puzzle mechanics, which has been really fun so far. But it's only been 2 weeks, so we'll see how it goes.
It's like fun.
Okay, next question. What is your favorite design tools? Jenny.
My favorite design tools? I would say probably arguing with Andrew.
Oh, no, you don't.
The one that we find, I mean, we're married, so it kind of makes it easier. But the one that I find that's the most profitable is the way when Andrew is telling me about a new mechanic and I misinterpret what he's saying. So he's telling me something about what he's doing and I get a picture in my head about what he's talking about. And it's very slightly different from what he's actually thought about. So there's a slight change in how I'm thinking about it. So I then say, oh, so that means that. And he goes, no, it means something completely, ooh, so that would mean, and we continually not quite think about something in the same way. So there's a slight disconnect each time. And the game will change in between each time Andrew's saying something and saying, I misinterpret that and say something else. But then I will do the same thing. I will say, oh, so that means this. And Andrew will then slightly misinterpret it, or at least imagine it in his own way. And again, it will change again. So we get these leaps of consciousness, which are jumping between the two people, but it's not quite a continuum. It goes off at different angles. So what we end up in the end, in the end, is something so different from the beginning. So the storytelling game was a very simple card game where you just pick cards up and collect a set, which is really quite a simple, straightforward game that we started with quite a long time ago. We've ended up with a storytelling game where you've still got the sets, but you now have to tell a story with it, which is completely different from a set collecting game. And that's because of these disjoints between what Andrew says something, I misinterpret it, I say something, he misinterprets it, and things develop that way. And it seems to be a really, really good way of developing. No. So that would be one of my favourite ways, and one of the ways I think we work best.
Design tools.
Yes, design tools.
So, I think in terms of the design process, there's two really important. One is gin, and the other is playtesting, because that's just incredibly interesting. You can sit and think about ideas and just go, right, okay, so I've designed, this is what you're supposed to do with that card, and this is what you're supposed to do with that action, and this is how that's supposed to work. And then you throw it in front of people and they just do it wrong. And it's incredibly interesting how they do it wrong. You just go, that wasn't supposed to happen. Why have they done that? That's not what the rules say. That's even better than what... So all of that, just seeing what people do with a couple of bits of cardboard is just amazing. And how possessive people are about bits of cardboard as well. That's my head. Give it... Hope that helps.
Yeah, Rita, what about yourself? What are your favourite design tools?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't really know what the answer is to that. I want to say like my sketchbook, maybe. Just drawing through, thinking through a lot of stuff. I normally, when I'm not in quarantine, I commute on the train to work, and that takes about an hour each way. So I'm usually like drawing things, writing things out, and kind of looks like a crazy person's like mad scientist sketchbook full of weird puzzle things. But other than that, I mean, I guess playtesting is a pretty good answer, because making puzzles, if nobody can solve it, then it doesn't work. But the problem for me with playtesting is that I can only have each person try something once. So it sort of becomes like a very limited resource that I have to savor and like wait until something is actually in a testable place before like deploying it to other people.
Bez, what about yourself? Favourite design tools? I have a sneaking suspicion that a marker pen might be in there.
Yeah, I actually wrote down a wee list because I'm going lost. From one perspective, it's my mind, body, and hands. Like the fact that I am a physical entity and I'm able to do things and think of things. That's like the ultimate tool. From a very pragmatic way, it's Stetler Lumo color, permanent. This one's bold, this one's fine. They are my pens of choice. There's also some red ones. of course. And InDesign, Blank Cards, Text Wrangler. If you are in the UK, go to kentandcleal.co.uk. That's KENTANDCLEAL. I don't get any money from them. They're just not Amazon, and they actually sell it cheaper than Amazon. Anyway, so from a point of view of process, I think, yeah, playtesting's already been talked about. Check out Playtest UK, which is meetup.com/playtest. And if you're based in London, when this pandemic is not happening and we're allowed out of our houses, you know, for silly reasons like playing board games, then we'd get together every Friday at Royal Festival Hall, and that's a lovely thing. And Ali Dix has been talking about how that's like the best career training thing that they've ever been to. But even now, Playtest UK were meeting online every Friday. So if you want to join us online, then feel free. And also, BGG, just like going on to Board Game Geek to check out all the other games out there. Inspiration, hearing about them can be really good. Doing a bit of what Jenny's talking about, misinterpreting stuff or taking a little bit of a game, using it for your own ideas. And finally, just the entire world. Like, you know, for like when you are going for walks or reading stories or magazines or watching a thing, it's all kind of food for the imagination. And ultimately, I don't think that if you were just in a cell, you know, in isolation, I think that we wouldn't be as creative as we currently are. So, yeah, hopefully that's some stuff.
Next question I have is, what is the one thing you wished you knew when you started designing that you now know that would have been such a major help along the way? And I'm going to start with yourself, Rita.
Well, I don't know that I didn't really know this, but I didn't really listen to it. So if that counts. The games that I've made so far have really complicated components that I've so the first game I pretty much handmade, and that's why it was like a limited edition thing. So it was just really complicated to make, and I knew I was only going to make a set amount, so I allowed it to be complicated. And I was planning to manufacture the second game, which I'm hoping to put on Kickstarter. So I thought I had simplified the 3D elements for that game, but turns out they are not that simple at all. And I think in my mind, because like I come from a 3D and kind of object design background, and I didn't realize sort of how limited manufacturers can be sometimes in the things that they make. So although they like have the capability to source kind of weird materials, sometimes 95% of the things they do is like cards and boards and meeples and stuff like that. So anything that's outside of that is like difficult, but the things that I came up with are apparently like downright exotic to them. So they just like I would send over all of my files and they're like, do you have any pictures so that we understand what you're talking about? And I'm like, I sent you a folder of pictures. It's right here. And then they look at it and they're like, oh, wow, this is really complicated. So hence my next game is going to be a deck of tarot cards. So that's going to be pretty easy to put together.
I was going to put that over to yourself, Bez.
Okay. There's a bit of an echo now.
Yeah.
Has someone got no headphones?
You, Bez. Over to you.
Sorry, I was just momentarily totally thrown off by the echo and everything. Yeah, I guess the one thing that I really didn't appreciate was how important marketing and being organized with regards to marketing and everything is. Because it's easy enough to do a lot of work and not really get anywhere, if you know what I mean. Like, you can go to lots of conventions and spend a lot of time on social media and do all the things, and then you're like, okay, maybe I will manage to get my Kickstarter to be good, and then kind of feel like, yeah, I'm still, not that much further along than 5 years ago. And there's maybe a bit of personal tale in that. But it's like yes, the quality of a game is super important. And like, there's a reason why this has sold more than 100, not quite more than 100 times as many yet, but about 70 times as many as this. And yes, one of the reasons is that this is smaller and it doesn't look as nice on the shop shelf. But the bigger reason is that this was made by a big company, and they've got the distribution network, they can get it out to more people, they've got a massive marketing budget. They go to Essen, and whereas I'm on a small stand, they've got like a big stand with a literal boxing ring where they're promoting the game, which, I'm really honored, and it's super awesome that my game is doing that. And so I guess my realization is less from a design point of view and more from an overall publishing point of view, because we are all talking as self-publishers, which does give a little bit of a skew on it. And I think that for myself, I love design. I love making games. I'm super into it. So I'd come into it like reading everything that Mark Rosewater had written, reading all these textbooks, like kind of making all these video games and flash games and stuff, and yeah, doing like plenty of playtesting and stuff. And it was a good game. I think, like, yeah, there's a bit of luck, but at the point where it sold hundreds of thousands, like, hopefully it's some level of quality. But to actually be able to do that yourself, when everyone's saying, oh, I'm going to try and go onto Kickstarter and then do my game, it's really tempting to think, okay, I'm going to print 1,000 copies and they will go away. Like, it's only 1,000, but 1,000 is actually a really big number. And even if you're going to all the conventions and you do manage to sell them, that does take, the travel, the accommodation, the kind of somewhere where you're paying for stuff like UK Games Expo. It all adds money. And so ideally you want to kind of be funneling that into people being able to find your website and buying games from you online, or other places, and getting relationships with board game shops. And you need to do all sorts of things with basically you get what I mean. Basically, that marketing and being organized about things and doing things in a sensible way is so much more important than I would like. And the first time I did my Kickstarter, I had this naive idea that, okay, oh my God, what if it goes crazy and it's like too many to sell? And I was actually slightly worried about me selling like 100,000, just like the original printing. Like, that's how I was making, because I knew it was a good game. But unless you have done that legwork, people don't find out about it. People don't trust you. And why should anyone care unless, you do need to kind of say, you need to show yourself off somehow, but you need, it depends. Do you want to be a designer, and do you want, sorry, I feel like I'm on the verge of rambling.
That's okay, Bez. I'm going to turn the same question over to Andrew and Jenny. What did you wish you knew when you started out that you know now?
I think I would quite like to have known. Yeah, so if I was starting again, if I was me talking to my naive Frankenstein's body self, I'd go. The advice would be: this is far more complicated than you think it's ever going to be. Partly because of some of the things that Bez said about, you've got to get these into the shops, you've got to market it, you've got to realise that you're a tiny little fish, and fighting against these massive behemoth whales that are, just ploughing across the place. So part of it would be, yes, this is hard. You're going to be involved in an awful lot of weird and wonderful, strange stuff. Most of which is exciting, and some of which is just confusing. And supplies, hey, excellent. But the other one would be, yes, design. I've started designing games with the specific aim of it being a yay game. So it has to be family friendly. It has to be a little bit of backstabbing, a little bit of, it has to be in the style of what we were trying to do. And up until recently, I've been designing games like that. Now, since recently, I've been just going, okay, let's just do games that are interesting and fun. And one of the things I would like to have known 5 years ago is write games for other publishers. That would be the thing that I'd tell myself back then.
For me, I think how to get the most out of playtesting. So how to use it in the most efficient manner possible. When we started with Frankenstein's Bodies, we were very conservative. We took a very, very scientific approach, which was you can only change one thing between each playtest. We couldn't change any more. We did shed loads of playtesting, and it took us quite a long time to get through and change and get information out of the playtests because we were only changing that one thing. Now we've got a lot more experienced. We can get information from a playtest and work out the things that haven't worked so well, and put in the things that we think have worked well. And actually, between different playtests, there can be huge changes in the game. So that between one playtest and another, the game can be almost totally different. But we've got that confidence in how we've taken feedback from people, how we know the game is, and how we know certain things can work. So how to playtest, how to get the most out of your people. I would love to have known that and a lot more about how to do that really well right from the beginning. I won't say we're experts, but we're more expert than we were.
But it's the broader strokes as well.
Yeah.
The ability, people go, well, that was really good, but it's taking too long. And then to be able to go, well, hang on, how can I halve the length of this game? And be able to do that quickly. Now, I think that's experience. Being able to make those changes faster. It's quite exciting.
Okay.
Isn't part of that, when you talk about making bigger changes, isn't part of that not just knowing that you can make bigger changes, but also having the experience to be able to analyse it better?
Yes.
And be more confident about it and know, because of the fact that we've made changes in the past, what the effect that was on that particular game. I mean, oddly, back to Frankenstein's Bodies, originally that was play one card, pick one card up. And very, very few of the actual changes of what the actions of the cards did, that's not changed very much. But it was play one, pick one. And there was a big argument between Jenny and I, discussion, of this game is too slow. This game is too slow. You can just undo what another person's done so quickly. So I said, I think the answer is play two, pick two. And there was this, no, it won't work. Let's just try it. And then we tried it and it worked. And that was the rules. So it's just being aware of what things can do to the experience within the game. If that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to turn that over to questions. You guys are welcome to ask questions of each other. If anyone in the audience has questions that they would like, then unmute and take it away, because we've got there's only a few of us, so it's not going to turn into utter chaos.
I'd ask a question of Rita. It's something you mentioned earlier. You said you find it very difficult to play test because you can only play test once because it's a puzzle, so people have to learn the game. How do you manage that? I mean, do you just have a huge number of people you can play test?
No. I mean, I think I learned to try and just make the most of every playtest that I can. I don't really end up doing as much playtesting as I would, or as I'm sure you do with like more, just regular games, because because when you're playing any other game, you have like 1,000 variables of which cards are people going to draw, what sort of move are they going to make. There's all this like strategic questions and decisions that people have to make. Whereas in a puzzle, you're not really, you're figuring out how to approach it and you're trying to solve it, but there's only one solution. So the person might deviate from that solution, and then I have to figure out why are they deviating from it and how can I get them back on track, or how can I prevent them from deviating in the first place. But like, it's like all roads lead to Rome kind of. So I just need to make sure that they go there, as opposed to like figuring out the logistics of potentially going in so many different directions. So, what I usually do is first I'm figuring out like the bare bones of a puzzle. So just the basic structure of it, and like, does it work at all? Can a human being solve this? Is it logical? Does it make sense? And I kind of have a few different sets of playtesters that I do different phases with. So I'll have some people just solve the very bare bones puzzle, and then once I kind of meld that with more of the narrative and story aspect, then I'll have some people that will kind of go through that whole thing, and then it's in its intermediate stage, and then I'll have different groups of people that are maybe like less puzzle dorks to solve it to like try the whole game in its later stages, because I want to make it more approachable to people who are not like super puzzle nerds, but I think oftentimes when I'm starting out with a puzzle, it ends up being too hard. So it takes some like going down that chain of like people who are just really good at puzzles and can solve those things, but can help you find like where you can make things clearer and easier. This might have been too long of an answer for what you asked. Does that make sense? Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're all muted.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just I was saying that was a great answer.
Very good.
I'm actually slightly curious because I know that for me, the reason I went to self-publishing rather than making games for other publishers, at least to start off with, was firstly because there is an energy involved in pitching games, especially if you're having to make videos and write rules, and then it's like, is this even going to be made? I mean, if I'm going to make a sell sheet and make a video and write the rule book, it's like at that point, well, I've almost gone most of the way. And at least that's how I figured it's in my mind when I didn't realize the whole marketing thing that I talked about. But the other thing is self-control. I want to have absolute control over things sometimes. But I wanted to ask you, Rita, and also Andrew and Jenny, if you want to answer for everyone, but I kind of know you better. Why did you go to self-publishing rather than pitching? Was it self-control or?
For me, it's sort of both of the things that you said. I definitely want to be able to retain creative control over my work, but I also like the idea of pitching things to publishers just like makes my head ache before I even like think about it for 5 minutes. I think the marketing aspect of self-publishing is definitely the hardest part for me, but I also don't think that, well, at least so far, I don't think the games I've made are super publisher friendly, because like I said, they're really complicated to make, and I don't think that there's really like that much profit to be made in them because they are sort of like a little niche and artsy. That might not be the case for the tarot cards, but at the same time with that, I'm like, it's so easy to publish that, so why wouldn't I just do it myself? Of course, the answer is the type of thing that I don't have like a distribution network. That would be the reason. But I think, yeah, like I can imagine if somebody looked at my game and was actually interested in doing something with it, they would be like, we need to simplify the hell out of this and cut it into like a million pieces. And I come from like an art and design background, so it's more, I don't know, I guess I feel like I'm making like an experience and a kind of like a piece of art for people to play. So I feel like disassembling the integrity of that would just be a big bummer, frankly. What about you guys?
I don't know. What was the question?
Why did he self-publish and not pitch?
Well, yeah, it was that sort of weird thing of having spent so long working on the first game, Frankenstein's Bodies, and doing all the artwork and doing all the playtesting and taking 2.5 years over it and learning how to use Photoshop and doing all that stuff. It seemed like it was a relatively short journey to then go, well, actually, the interest we've got off this, let's just put it on Kickstarter and see what happens. So it almost accidentally fell into it, really. But during that process of developing that game and testing it and making something so creative, then it became a case of, well, I want to do another one. So, yeah.
I think it was definitely, okay, so what's next? So having kind of fallen into the first one, it's what's next, and then what's next, and then what's next. And actually what we've done from that is we've kind of started progressing from the traditional self-publishing into the Gruffalo, where we have 2 other designers who are involved. We're now starting to publish other people. And also we are hopefully at some point, fairly soonish, depending on COVID-19, Andrew's got a game coming out with another publisher fairly soon. So actually we're spreading into other things. So that's not a game that Yay Games has published. It's a completely different one. So actually we're trying to spread out from publishing our own games, publishing other designers, and now getting other publishers to publish the designs that we've come up with, so that we've got all 3 strands working.
I think the weird part was starting off and just going, oh, I've got a game. And Frankenstein's Bodies was the game. And then to go, right, okay, so I want to get this one game done. How do I get that to the public? Well, let's just put it on Kickstarter. If we have to put it on Kickstarter, then we have to have a company. We have to have a company. What's that company going to do? And then it was, what's the next Yay game? What's the next Yay game? What's the next Yay game? Whereas now it's turned into more, what's the next game? What's the next Andrew Harman game? I can design games and give them to other publishers. What are other publishers looking for? There's now people coming up because of the back of the stuff we did with the Gruffalo, going, have a look at this project, and have a look at this book, and have a look at this TV show. So all of that now is just going, well, I can't publish that because it just won't fly. So it's just constantly changing, constantly broadening, which is quite exciting. So yes, the making a publisher of your own and getting something to market was only the beginning.
I think the main thing is that Yay Games doesn't have the capability of publishing everything that we want to do. We're not a big enough company. But by getting other publishers to start publishing our games, that's a way of us getting more ideas, more games out to people who want to play them.
That sounds like a very natural progression.
Just when you say it like that, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like I could kind of see that vaguely in like the future. You know what I mean? But I feel like I'm still in that first stage of like, what's the next game that I'm gonna self-publish?
Well, I
It's
think
taken us a long time to get here.
this is basically all we have time for in this slot. I have been asked by people if this will be going out as a YouTube cast from the Scaled Events channel.
Okay.
Is everyone cool with that? And I will link it to your stuff.
Yes, that would be marvellous.
Yes.
I don't think I've said anything too offensive. So,
I don't think anyone has said anything that's not PG or even universal.
It only started recording partway through, so it will go out as here's part of it. But okay.
Okay.
Well done, Tiggs. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for coming along.
Nice meeting all of you guys.
Yes.
Good seeing you again. Shame I didn't get to see Andrew and Jenny. I don't know what's happening with. I can't see Andrew and Jenny. I don't know why.
You know how beautiful I am, so it's fine.
But I hope I'll get to see you at some point in the not too distant future, even if it's virtual.
Yes, we hope so.
Yes. Good to talk to you, Rita.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
Good to talk to you guys.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Well done, Tiggs. Thank you.